In the previous video, we saw how the modern digital world is designed to compete for our attention. The notification, the infinite scrolling, the personalized algorithms, the variable rewards. But that only explains what's happening outside the brain. Today, in this video, we are going inside it because we have probably heard people say things like your dopamine is fried, the social media destroys dopamine, just do a dopamine detox. But how much of that is actually true? The real neuroscience is far more fascinating, and understanding it might completely change how you think about the motivation, habits, and the attention. So, let's clear up one of the biggest myths on the internet, that is the great dopamine myth. And if you have spent any time watching the productivity videos, you have probably heard statements like the dopamine is the pleasure chemical. Your phone fries your dopamine. Just do a dopamine detox. These these statements sound convincing, but neuroscience tells a much more interesting story. And the dopamine is not simply the brain's pleasure chemical. In fact, the people can experience the pleasure even when the dopamine signaling is reduced. So, what does dopamine actually do? One of its most important roles is helping the brain learn what is worth paying attention to and what's worth pursuing. The dopamine helps us to answer the various questions like, should I do this again? Is this important? Should I keep trying? The dopamine is about the motivation. Suppose imagine our ancestors searching for the food. If they found a tree full of fruit, their brain needed a way to remember it. The dopamine help reinforce the behavior that improve the survival, like finding food, finding water, the building relationship, learning, exploring. Not because these things were always pleasurable, but because they were valuable. But today, the same system still exists in our brain, but except now the instead of fruit trees, our brain dopamine is responding to the like, notification, the messages, the short videos, the breaking news, and every time something unexpected appears, your brain asks your, is this important? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it is important, but often many times often it is just another cat video or and other random videos or a random scroll, but your brain doesn't know until it looks. Why novelty is so powerful? Here is a fascinating fact. Your brain is naturally attracted to the novelty. Why? Because throughout the evolution, the new things could mean opportunity or danger, a new food source, a new predator, a new shelter, a new social alliance. Paying attention to something new increase the chance of survival, and that is ancient survival system is still operates today, and which means that every notification, every new post, and every headline saying the breaking news automatically competes for your attention, and not because you are weak, but because your brain has been evolved with that way. Your brain is a prediction machine. So the scientists increasingly describe the brain as a prediction machine. Your brain constantly predicts what will happen next. Then, then our brain compares our expectation with the reality. Imagine checking your phone. Sometimes nothing is interesting. Sometimes there is an exciting message. Sometimes someone has liked your post, and sometimes there is the bad news. But the internet, the phone is unpredictable. The unpredictability matters for our brain. That unexpected reward often triggers stronger dopamine responses than expected one, and this is the one reason unpredictable digital reward can become so compelling. And your brain consumes around 20% of your body's energy, and even though it makes up only about 2% of your body weight, it consumes 20% of your energy. And because thinking is expensive, the brain tries to automate the repeated behavior. And this is where the habit comes from. At first, checking your phone requires a conscious decision. and eventually you don't decide it. You simply reach your pocket. You even without realizing it, you go to the pocket and check your phone. And have you ever unlocked your phone only to forget why you picked it up? That's called habit loop in action. Not because you are addicted, but because the repeated behavior become increasingly automatic. And there is something called as neuroplasticity, the brain that changes itself. One of the most remarkable discoveries in the neuroscience is something called as neuroplasticity. And for centuries, the people believe the adult brain was fixed. But today we know that that's the wrong. Your brain changes throughout your life. Every repeated behavior strengthens the certain neural pathway. Think of walking through a forest. The first time there it is difficult, there is no path. But if you walk the same route every day, or a trail appears, the more often you use it, the clearer it becomes. The brain works similarly. The more frequent you switch attention, the better your brain becomes at switching. The more frequently you sustain focus, the better your brain becomes at sustained focus. That's the clue. And in other words, you become what you repeatedly practice. So why reading feels harder than it used to? So many people have the similar experience, and they tell something interesting. I used to finish a book easily. Now I read just 2 pages and suddenly I want to check my phone. This isn't because the books have become worse. The books haven't changed. Our habits have. The reading requires a sustained attention. The reading requires sustained attention, as we discussed in the first video about the attention, the patience, the working memory, the imagination, the digital media often rewards something different. It rewards the rapid shift, the novelty, the constant stimulation. But neither of these are inherently bad. But if your brain spent hours and hours each day practicing the rapid switching, then the reading a slow thoughtful book naturally feels more difficult, just like someone who stops exercising and finds running harder months after inactivity. So you may be thinking, is my brain permanently damaged? So this is where many people become discouraged, and they worry, have I ruined my attention forever? Fortunately, the evidence says no. The brains have the remarkable capacity to adapt. It the just as repeatedly the repeat just as repeated distraction strengthens the distraction, the repeated focus strengthens focus. The neuroplasticity works both the way. That means your attention can improve, not overnight, not with one productivity trick, but through consistent practice. Just like learning an instrument or building the muscle, you can train your brain. The attention is just like the physical fitness. Imagine someone who hasn't exercised for 5 years. They go to the gym once, they are exhausted. Does that mean they are incapable of becoming fit? Of course not. It simply means that they are out of the practice. So attention works in much the same way. The Many of us have unknowingly spent years training our brain for interruption. The now the the deep focus feel uncomfortable. That discomfort isn't proof that you are incapable. It's the proof that you are asking for your brain to do something it hasn't the practice recently. And like every skill, the it improves with training. The hope. This is perhaps the most important message of today's video. You are not doomed by your smartphone. You are not permanently damaged by the social media. Your attention is not something you either have or you don't have. The attention is the skill, and skill can be trained. The science of neuroplasticity gives us genuine reason for the optimism. And every time you choose to read instead of scroll, every time you resist an unnecessary notification, and every time you complete a period of deep work, you are quite literally helping your brain practice sustained attention. And small choices, repeated consistency can save the can reshape the way you think. So if our brains are capable of change, why do people still struggle with the attention much more than other? The answer is that the smartphones are the only part of the story. Sometimes the poor attention is actually some symptom of something deeper. It may be the either sleep deprivation, the chronic stress, the anxiety, the depression, and or ADHD, the poor physical health, and even the nutritional deficiency. And in the next part, we will explore the often overlooked medical and psychological causes of the poor concentration and why simply telling someone to try harder can miss the real problem. And we will see in the next video. And remember, your attention shapes what you learn, what you remember, and ultimately who you become. The protect it wisely, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you. Dr. Swarnim signing out.